Is your business struggling to stand out from the crowd online? At Webamax, we specialize in turning clicks into customers. From SEO and PPC to social media management and stunning web design, we've got you covered. Boost your online presence and drive real results. Ready to take your business to the next level? Visit Webamax.com. That's Webimax.com for a free digital analysis. Rule the web with Webamax.com.
With the Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
This is your captain speaking. We've got clear runway and the weather's fine, but we're just going to circle up here a while and get lucky. No, nothing like that. It's just these cash prizes add up quick. So I suggest you sit back, keep your tray table upright, and start getting lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
It's time for today's Lucky Land horoscope with Victoria Cash.
Life's gotten mundane, so shake up the daily routine and be adventurous with a trip to Lucky Land. You know what they say, your chance to win starts with a spin. So go to LuckyLandSlots.com to play over 100 social casino-style games for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. Get lucky today at LuckyLandSlots.com.
Available to players in the U.S., excluding Washington and Michigan. No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply.
Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Coincidence? I think not. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere, even at 30,000 feet. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
Hey there, Duke fans, and welcome to episode number 632 of the Duke Basketball Roundup. This is the second part you've been waiting for, the second part of our Brendan Marks interview. Before we get to that interview, I'm Donald Wine. I'm your host for this episode. I got Jason Evans with me. Spoiler alert, we are recording these back-to-back. We had the DBR Bites that we did that dropped in your feeds yesterday. It's Tuesday, and then this one is being recorded right after that. So if something happened between now and when this dropped, that's not on us. That's just the world doing that. But Jason, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, man. Yeah, we had a good time talking about the NBA Finals, but yeah, we are really eager for folks to get a listen to the additional comments that Brendan Marks has. I mean, the dude brought the knowledge in a very, very big way, and we can't wait for all of you to hear it and for us to talk about it.
Yeah, and as a reminder, we have part one of that interview with Brendan Marks on episode 631. On that one, we focused a lot on Duke specifically, the Duke roster, how it was shaped, how it was constructed. And we kind of got into a little bit of matchmaker of who's going to be playing, who might be starting, who might be figuring for lots of minutes. So go back and listen to that if you want the Duke side of things. This episode, this part of the interview will focus on the ACC as a whole, not just UNC. We do talk about that obviously extensively because Brendan Marks not only is a UNC grad, but covers UNC and Duke as beat writer. But also we cover the rest of the ACC, all 18 teams, because there's now 18 of them, and we have to worry about what's happening with each and every one of them. We kind of go through some of the transfer portal, NIL is involved, who might be good, who might have been reloaded, who might have missed their opportunities on some players in the offseason to get better. And it's a great, great interview. And of course, we had to break this up. So why don't we give you that right now? Here it is, that second half of the interview with Brendan Marks.
All right, so we had a great conversation about Duke, but Duke is just one of, 18 teams now?
Too many.
Right. Whatever. It's a crazy number. I can't even keep track of how many it is that you have to follow. And oh my God. I mean, some of these teams Duke saw 7 guys come out and 4 guys come in, but there are teams out there that saw 8, 9 guys transfer out. Louisville completely turned over their roster. First of all, just tell me what it was like trying to keep up with all of this. It must have been insane. Over the course of 3 weeks, or so, every team in the ACC completely remade themselves, except maybe Carolina. Carolina may be the only team that didn't.
Yeah, it's madness. I want to give a shout out, a shameless plug to my buddy at ESPN, Jeff Borzello, who has put together what I am treating as the Bible of roster moves, tracking every team, who they lost, who they gained, whatever. I was looking at it the other day. I was scrolling down in the SEC for this project we're working on, and I was like, that guy went there, like completely missed that. And you can't stay on top of them all. I mean, I took a weekend and my wife and I went to the mountains and, four different guys had changed teams, three in the ACC. It's like crazy. The biggest thing I would say is like, we hear so much about when you see it on social media, you want to think it's, done, and it's not always done. For me, the biggest thing is like, things could still change. If Dan Hurley had gone to the Lakers, UConn's entire roster pool was suddenly up for grabs. Guys can move, guys can decommit. I mentioned how much I like that Rylan Griffin went to Kansas. They had another guy who's filling his role from Florida who ended up decommitting after Rylan Griffin committed because you basically got committed, you got recruited over in one transfer portal cycle. So, for me, this is about the time of year now that we're past the draft deadline for guys to withdraw. This is the time where I really start trying to actually learn things, start calling coaches, trying to get a sense of like, okay, hey, who you got, who do you like, how are you going to play, those sorts of things. Because up until now, things are still so fluid that it's impossible to reasonably keep track of it all. And you're still hoping things are going to come to fruition. I mean, North Carolina has been was waiting for guys for weeks and weeks and weeks to make decisions. They make a decision that you weren't counting on, and then all of a sudden you got to pivot and figure something else out entirely. So it's crazy, man. It's absolutely crazy. It's exhausting. I do not envy the coaches who have to do it, but that's why they get paid the big bucks, and I do not, so I can just tune in June.
We talked, Jason and I talked a couple episodes ago about all of the interconference transfers that are going on, especially within the ACC. And we kind of talked about something that this is something that's going to be here to stay with the new mega conferences that we have now and the new college sports landscape. What's your sense? Is this something we're going to see more and more of, like transfers within conference, especially within the ACC, now that we are at 187 teams?
Yeah, 100% we are. Until there aren't conferences anymore, until it's just one giant super league. But yeah, I mean, like the guys transferring interconference, guys, I don't think I've joked about this with different coaches, but like we've seen it in football now where a guy has gone from, like Duke to NC State, or from NC State to North Carolina, or North Carolina to Duke. Like it's going to happen in basketball eventually. It's going to happen, and it's going to be weird, and it's going to be foreign, and it's going to take some serious getting used to, but it's going to happen. Coaches can leave at any point. Players can leave at any point. I actually had a player in this project we're doing about NIL in the portal, and he asked me, if ESPN came to you and offered you $10 million to do your same job, but for them, wouldn't you go? And I was like, well, they're my direct competitor right now, but yeah, absolutely I would. 100%. You would too. And so like, a lot of it is laundry, and some fans don't want to hear that. I love college basketball, so I don't love saying that. But we are going to just keep seeing those interconference transfers. You're going to see Marfos where guys leave and then come back 2 years later and come back to the same school. It's really about the best situation. It's unlimited free agency every single year right now, at least for the time being. But doing it in the conference, who cares? Who cares? It really doesn't make a difference. Joe Girard transferred interconference and came within a sniff of making the Final Four last year. Good for him. He hadn't had a run like that in 4 years at Syracuse. He goes to Clemson for 1 year and gets it. Awesome. So I don't have any problem with it. Let the guys go wherever they want. Total freedom of movement. Again, coaches are getting paid handsomely to handle it all, but it's not going to stop anytime soon. If anything, it's just going to keep getting crazier.
All right, break down for me, man. Which ACC teams do you think really did a great job in the portal? We'll start with that, and then maybe you can give us some that you think needed to do more.
Yeah, I think one that needed to capitalize on their momentum and did was NC State. I was over on NC State's campus before they actually left for the Final Four to do a story, And they had a guy who, one of the guys they ended up getting in the transfer portal was there on a visit. They'd already scheduled it. And he was like, oh, wait, you guys are leaving tomorrow. And they're like, yep, but we're making time for you. I think they did a really
Pretty
nice
good
It's a
pitch.
nice recruiting
yeah,
tool.
exactly. Yeah. So, but you get Brandon Hatley Hatfield, who is a proven, if not above average, at least average ACC starter. He's someone who's going to come in, is immediately going to be able to play a role. Dontrez Styles took a huge leap last year after he'd left North Carolina. Again, has familiarity with the conference. I don't think he counts as an interconference transfer because he took a year away, whatever. Yeah. So I think in those two guys, they did a really nice job. They also got two scoring guards. You get Marcus Hill, you get Mike James. Those are two guys who can fill it up. Like that's going to be a lengthier, you still got some guys coming back from this year. You got Middlebrooks back. You got Jaden Taylor back. Would have loved for them to get Hassan Diarra back. But NC State has a bunch of guys who can fill it up, has a lot of length, I think has a lot of malleability, defensive versatility. I think they needed to capitalize and absolutely did. You've seen it from a scheduling perspective too. So I think NC State is absolutely one of the ones I like. Virginia, I think is really, if maybe not great, but interesting. I have no idea how this is going to work, but I think it's fascinating. I like the pieces they brought in a lot. Obviously, TJ Power would have been, had he gone there out of high school, would have been one of the highest high school commits, in Virginia program history.
Yep.
Is he going to play the 4? Is he going to play the 3? I don't know. They brought in Elijah Saunders from San Diego State, who I went out there and did a story on them last year, was really impressed by him, really mature. One of the only guys I can remember in college basketball who was starting and asked to come off the bench. But again, is coming from a school that has those defensive principles. I think he'll fit right in there. You get Worley from Florida State. Day-Day Ames is a legitimate point guard from Kansas State. So I really like what Virginia did. And obviously McNeely comes back and he's the straw that stirs the whole drink. But that's a team that offensively could have a bunch of guys who can create and can shoot. So I think Virginia is interesting. And then Louisville, Pat Kelsey. I mean, had a completely blank slate and may have built an NCAA tournament team in one offseason, and just further incriminating Kenny Payne and his inability to do so.
Yeah.
But, I really
and brought a bunch of guys that he already knows from Charleston. He brought like 3 or 4 guys from Charleston with him.
Exactly. Yeah. Brings Rain Smith from Charleston. Terrence Edwards from JMU is kind of the creme de la creme for them. He's going to be one of their best players.
Oh, yeah. Believe me, Duke fans saw him in the NCAA tournament.
Exactly. So, I really like, again, and it helps when you can bring in 10 guys because if you miss on 3 of them, you miss on 3 of them. But Louisville's backers and their fan base clearly gave him enough resources spelled with a $sign to go out and get those guys. And so I think he did a really nice job of completely flipping a roster that needs to be flipped. So right off the top of my head, those are 3 that I was really impressed with and like. And, I think that all 3 of those teams can be tournament teams next season.
All right. So the other side of the coin then is, who do you feel like needed to make moves and really didn't?
Yeah, well, I'll start with a team who I know very well, North Carolina. I don't know if I say they would have needed to do more, but just didn't get the guys who they were after. And sometimes it goes that way.
Yeah.
North Carolina was really big on Aaron Bradshaw early, Ohio State. Then they were really big on Jonas Adu, Arkansas. Then they were really big on, Cliff Amori was the guy that they kind of, sold the farm hoping that he would be the one. And, for him to pick Alabama in terms of their front court depth really set them back. I mean, this is a North Carolina team that, as you guys know, Armando Bacot's been there 100 years. Not having him anymore, they need somebody who can fill that role. And Jalen Washington is a good player, but has only ever been a role player. And depending on him, especially with his injury history, to be the guy unquestionably, especially you look at the caliber of big men they were targeting, clearly your actions reveal how you feel. And so, they were able to get Cade Tyson, who I think is one of the best shooters in the portal for this team, is going to be a great fit offensively. Carolina, it's kind of funny.
He's going to struggle on defense.
Well, Carolina's kind of gone for the Duke method from last year, which is we're going to play super small and we're going to have a ton of shooters and we're going to have to score 90 points a game to win. I don't think it's inconceivable that North Carolina starts, Elliot Cadeau at point guard, RJ Davis at shooting guard, Ian Jackson, who's 6'5" at the 3, and then Cade Tyson, who's about 6'6", 6'7" at the 4. I don't think that's inconceivable. which again, the rebounding is going to be for North Carolina like diehards, tough to swallow, but that's a team that can be pretty potent offensively, obviously. So, we've seen what a sharpshooting four can do in Hubert Davis's offense. So in that respect, I do think it could work, but missing on a couple.
Hey, Brennan, let me jump in and ask something about Carolina and missing on all these big men. Was it NIL dollars, or was there something else?
Let me think of the best way to answer that question. The two programs in the ACC with the best NIL infrastructure are Duke and North Carolina. Neither of them is like the best in the country. That's
right.
That's SEC and frankly Big 12 territory.
Right. I was going to say Kansas is elite.
Look at who Baylor got.
Yeah.
But Duke and North Carolina are both more than competitive. I think it's, this has come up in my reporting about this NIL portal project, is it's a lot easier to get donors to pay for retention than it is for new recruits, because it's hard to sell somebody on, hey, you've never seen this guy play, you don't know him from Adam, you have no idea what he's going to do or how he fits or whatever, but I'm asking you to pay him this 7-figure amount.
Yeah. He's worth $1.2 million.
That's hard. That's hard for a lot of people to swallow. And again, it's a thing where, who's the best player at North Carolina? RJ Davis. He is legitimately, he's going to be the ACC preseason player of the year, as he should be. He's probably going to be the preseason national player of the year. You can make the argument he should be. He is one of the best players in college basketball. He was last year. He's going to be this year. He's the kind of guy who, if we were strictly talking about it from a meritocracy standpoint, should be one of the most highly paid players in all of college basketball. I'm not going to say what he's making. He's being very handsomely compensated. It's hard to bring in somebody who's making more than that guy in the pecking order. And that is not just a problem.
Great point.
That is a problem that a lot of schools have had, where you have a guy who is very established, who has produced for you, who has been loyal, who your donors and your fans are very familiar with. And you have the opportunity to add a player who fits, but is he going to be that caliber of the guy they know? No. And that's hard for some fan bases and donors to get behind. So if North Carolina wanted to get some of those guys, they could have gotten them. Let me put it that way. This was not a situation where North Carolina, like, quote unquote, couldn't afford those guys. But it's a situation where when you guys go out to a fancy dinner and you see the menu, you say, hey, well, I can get the $100 tomahawk, or I can get the $60 strip, and I can add a lobster tail for $40. How do you want to spend your money? And so, I think it comes down to that for those guys and for a lot of people.
It's funny you mentioned that. I think that's a great point, because we saw that at Miami, where Nigel Pack came in with that $800,000 NIL offer. And then the first thing that happened was Isaiah Wong, quote unquote, held out for more money because he was the established star. And he was like, you are not paying me that much. Get me up to a level that if you're going to be paying him this much, I'm already here. Get me up to a point. And you may see that quite a bit within schools.
Absolutely. And so, it is not, it's not ideal. I mean, but I should say this. I don't know if fans are aware of this, but the role of the head coach, just as like a recruiter and being like, hey, you're going to come in and you're going to play this role and we're going to win these games and you're going to get this education and you're going to have access to our network of alumni. That used to be the recruiting pitch. Now it is as much about salary cap management as it is about actually building the roster. Like college head coaches, salary cap management, I would say, is probably the number one thing they have to handle in transfer portal recruiting and high school recruiting, frankly. It is something that is still kind of hard for some fans to wrap their heads around. I cannot be more clear here. Salary cap management, as crazy as it sounds, is the number one most important thing in transfer portal recruiting. Doesn't matter what level, doesn't matter who the kid is. That is a constant at all different levels of the sport, all different conferences, all different levels. It is the way things are now, and you either accept that and you lean into it, or, enjoy your job while you still got it.
All right. Back on the question that started us down this track, which was ACC teams that maybe struggled a little bit in the portal. You gave us Carolina, and then we went off on a tangent, which I loved. Any other teams that you sort of look at and go, those guys needed to do more to be really competitive?
Yeah, I don't love the situation in Miami. Losing Norchad Omier hurts. I mean, he was one of the best players in the conference.
Special, it's a special guy. Yeah.
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 Now you're bringing back Pack. I believe they're bringing back Cleveland. You're bringing in Jaleel Bethea, who's a top 10 recruit, but you also lost Wooga Poplar, who could be a first round pick somewhere else. Um, it's never been an incredibly deep team. Larinaga doesn't go 10 deep in his rotation. Um, I just wonder if losing, two legitimate starters like that, if they brought in guys who can, fully replace them.
Yeah, from a team that underperformed, frankly, last year as well.
And they were also
from a team. Right, right. So that's a tough one, I think, as well. Obviously, I think a team that I did like that I didn't mention before, by the way, Georgia Tech. Like Georgia Tech a lot. Being able to bring in McCollum from Oklahoma, I think he fits really well. Getting back Bayandongo, who, in my opinion, is one of the best players in the country, or one of the best freshmen in the country last year. Super productive.
I'm super glad you're saying this. I'm really high on Georgia Tech. I'm glad to hear you reinforce
yeah. Another one I really like Mike Young as a coach. I just don't know that he's ever had all of the bodies that he needs. Losing Sean Padula is kind of a backbreaker to me. They lost Tyler Nickel as well. Those are two guys who, had the pedigree, were in the system.
And Lynn Kidd, who is like their best big man. Yeah.
Lynn Kidd, Hunter Couture's gone now. So,
Virginia Tech lost everybody.
Right. So, and they're not necessarily bringing in guys to replace them. So Virginia Tech is another tough one. Syracuse lost a lot of guys too. Kadir Copeland, you lose him. Obviously lost Malik. I think there are a couple clear winners. There are a couple not. And, and then there's schools like I think Wake Forest is interesting. I don't know that I'd call them a winner or a loser. Just an interesting change. Like you go and get Omaha Bielo from Iowa State. Steve Forbes traditionally does really well with those guys. You get Spiller from Appalachian State. Those guys could both be starters. Most importantly, you get Salas back. But
yeah, every year it feels like Wake Forest gets a guy who you're like, oh, that guy could be good, but he hasn't been so far. And then he comes to Wake Forest and he's great.
Right. You lost Boopy Miller, who I wasn't the biggest on him, and that's an ad for SMU, who's now in the conference.
By the way, to me, that is one of the crazier moves in the conference. I mean, I guess SMU has a better NIL program than Wake Forest. That shouldn't be, I guess that's not that surprising, but I mean, like, Boopy Miller was like 15.5 points per game, started every game for Wake Forest. Suddenly he's going to play for a conference, right? It just seems crazy.
Andrew Carr, was another multi-year
but he goes
there.
to Kentucky. That's a different story. Yeah.
And it's not Kentucky like it's used to have been Kentucky, though. I mean, this is a Kentucky team that's, an island of misfit toys. So it's interesting. I think there are some who do really well. Like Clemson is interesting. You get Chase Hunter back. Like sometimes the best ones you get are the ones you keep. So yeah, I think it'll be interesting. But again, with 18 teams, going to be a lot of parity. And again, with the turnover, we talked about how much Miami underperformed last year. Somebody like that can just rocket right back up. Somebody who had Louisville, for example, can go from worse to, they could be a top 14 this year. So in this era, all it takes is one good offseason. You can completely turn your roster.
You just mentioned sometimes the best recruit is the one that you keep. Pin that for a second. I'm going to come back to that because it's a question I had in mind. But I did want to offer a question about where these recruits are coming from throughout the ACC. With the expansion of access, we can see just about any college basketball game in America, right? Kareem Abdul-Jabbar did not go to a Power 5 school, but he is a household name in college basketball. Was there, with all these teams, all these recruits all over the place, was there more of an emphasis on getting guys from Power 5, Power 6 conferences? I know the Pac-12 is now dead, but like, were they trying to get team or players from those type of schools, or was there a pipeline of still players from mid-majors where, again, they were able to see more of those games and thus get more of an evaluation about some of those players?
Yeah, I don't have the exact stat, and I wish I did. But I saw somebody, one of my colleagues had this a couple of weeks ago. It's like a crazy high percentage, maybe 90% of mid-major all-conference performers who are not returning to their previous schools.
It's insane. Yeah.
If you were a mid-major all-conference guy, you're gone. Just because the payday is so dramatically different. I mean, like, I could tell you guys, like, for a I would say top 50, for a team that is hoping to make the NCAA tournament, your NIL budget needs to be at least $2.5 million annually. For a like high major team in a power conference that's trying to do that. If you're not at least at $2.5 million, you got no chance because you're just not getting those guys. The NIL budget, even at like really, really good mid-major schools, is sometimes like 300 or 500,000. And so like the multiples of dollars that we're talking about, it just makes it a whole different ballgame. And conversely, you'll see a lot of high major guys who, even if you've had a modicum of success and you can go and be the guy at a mid-major and command most of that NIL budget, oftentimes it is more than you were making as the 11th or 12th guy at a high major contender. So I think it's both. Really the access is as great as it's ever been. I mean, like basketball talent is so dispersed now, like we're starting to see international recruiting to a whole new extent. Duke has obviously gotten in that ballpark with Come On this year. I think that's something the staff wants to continue to explore. You see guys at OTE, you see guys from overseas, you see guys in the NBL. There are just up until now, the G League Ignite. There are guys from mid majors who get drafted in the first round. Look at Jalen Williams a couple of years ago. And he's absolutely killing it with the Thunder. Like, if you are good, people will find you. And so, like you're talking about, we can watch any game we want right now. So it's much more about the player and the skill set than where they come from, I'd say. It's a benefit if they've played at a high level. Like Duke appreciated that Mason Gillis played the national championship game. It is not a prerequisite, though, I'd say.
We're going to have more with Brendan Marks after a quick break, so stay tuned. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with more of that interview.
Okay, round two. Name something that's not boring.
A laundry? Ooh, a book club. Computer solitaire, huh?
Ah, sorry, we were looking for Chumba Casino. That's right, ChumbaCasino.com has over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Judy was boring.
Hello.
Then Judy discovered ChumbaCasino.com.
It's my little escape.
Now Judy's the life of the party.
Oh, baby, mama's bringing home the bacon.
Whoa, take it easy, Judy. The Chumba life is for everybody. So go to ChumbaCasino.com and play over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Hey guys, it is Ryan. I'm not sure if you know this about me, but I'm a bit of a fun fanatic when I can. I like to work, but I like fun too. It's a thing. And now the truth is out there. I can tell you about my favorite place to have fun. Chumba Casino. They have hundreds of social casino style games to choose from with new games released each week. You can play for free anytime, anywhere. And each day brings a new chance to collect daily bonuses. So join me in the fun. Sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
Judy was boring.
Hello.
Then Judy discovered ChumbaCasino.com.
It's my little escape.
Now Judy's the life of the party.
Oh, baby, mama's bringing home the bacon.
Whoa, take it easy, Judy. The Chumba life is for everybody. So go to ChumbaCasino.com and play over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
I told you to pen it earlier, but you were mentioning, some of the guys who were recruited to stay, not necessarily recruited through the portal, and maybe they entered the portal and came back. But we talk about, RJ Davis coming back to UNC. For us, Caleb Foster and Tyrese Proctor coming back were two, those are significant returnees. Who had the best recruiting job of keeping somebody on their team that can, impact the ACC next season?
Ooh, that's a good question. I mean, obviously RJ Davis, keeping him, and that's why NIL is great, because a couple of years ago, RJ Davis probably doesn't stay because he's
and not just him, but Elliot Cadeau, Seth Trimble. I mean, like the fact they brought all three of those guys back to me is unbelievable.
Yeah, it's great. But RJ specifically, a couple of years ago, that's a guy who leaves and goes and he has to get paid professionally overseas. He's making 3 times this year what he would be making in, Turkey or wherever he would be, Japan, Scotland, whatever. So I think that's a big one. Clemson, you bring back Chase Hunter, that is a huge one, a huge, huge one. They were not the biggest stars, but I mentioned all that talent NC State brought in. Getting back 2 guys who were not just like bit pieces, but actual role players in Middlebrooks and Jaden Taylor at NC State. I think that's a big one. Hunter Salas at Wake Forest. I mean, we had a lot of like all ACC caliber guys who were back. Getting back packing Cleveland down to Miami, especially with how many guys they had lost. Trying to think of some other ones. Notre Dame. Notre Dame is able to get back, Marcus Burton, able to get back Shrewsbury. Those are great pulls. Obviously Georgia Tech getting back.
Wait, hold on. Shrewsbury wasn't going anywhere.
Yeah.
Let's be clear.
That's fair.
Daddy's going to get to keep you around.
Hey, Michael Savarino entered the portal, so
yeah.
I mean, it can't happen.
Right. Yeah,
it's. Georgia Tech getting back in Dongo, like I said, that's huge. They've also got back Nate George. Those are 2 important ones. So, and that's the thing. The days where you're returning 5 or 6 guys, like a whole starting lineup, it's just impossible now.
Because you didn't mention him. I think Pitt did a really nice job.
Yeah, losing. If they had gotten back Bub, I think that would have taken.
Well, but he's going to go first round of the NBA draft. You're not going to keep that guy.
Probably, but
they got Jalen Lowe back.
They did.
Ishmael Leggett's coming back for another year.
They got Leggett back as well. Yeah,
and both the Diaz Graham twins. I mean, that's a pretty good. In an era where guys can go any place, they did pretty well.
But that's the thing. If you can get 3 starters back, 4 starters back, you take that and you run. Because the days of getting back an entire starting lineup, it's just not really conceivable anymore. There's too much opportunity, too many people in your ear, too much freedom, too much ease of player movement, which is a good thing. Guys should go where's the best situation for them. But so if you can get back, especially if it's a star and 2 more role players, 2 more starters, I mean, that means you're doing really well.
All right. Last question. And you've kind of given us some hints at this already, but if you're, I'm not going to ask you to put them in order, but maybe put them in tiers. What do you feel like are like the top, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 teams in the ACC for next season?
Definitely, I would, not that this has meant much lately in the last decade, but I would pick Duke first. Hasn't always come to fruition, but the talent is there. I'd put North Carolina second. Obviously, I think, you bring back a guy like RJ and anything's possible. I do think that I am concerned about their front court. I am. Just like I was concerned about Duke's front court this year, and it ended up being a problem. I'm concerned about North Carolina's front court. I would say that's probably tier 1, tier 2. And then your next tier of like contenders would be an NC State, a Georgia Tech, a Clemson, maybe a Wake Forest, Virginia. I'd put in that tier of like teams who can make the NCAA tournament, maybe Pitt. And then I'd go down a tier and that's where I would get into like your Syracuse, Boston College, some of those teams. Yeah. No, I'd have Louisville higher. I mean, I think Louisville can be a tournament team next year. But yeah, I mean, I would say my top like 6 or so would be, Duke, Carolina, and then, 3 to 6 or 7 would be NC State, Louisville, Georgia Tech, Wake Forest, Virginia, probably. And again, I'm not as well versed on the expansion teams yet. I gotta familiarize myself with those rosters. But of those 3, I would say that definitely SMU I think has the best chance to have immediate success. Although in the long run, really like Kyle Smith and Stanford, I think that could be a really strong team in a couple of years from now.
Dude, you have given us so much time, so much insight. We really appreciate it. A ton of fun. By the way, when is your big study coming out on NIL and the transfer portal that you're working on with the other folks at The Athletic? Because just based on the hints you've given us here, I need to read that.
Yeah, it's a series that we're working on. We just turned in the first piece, so hopefully it'll be coming out in the next couple of weeks. I'd say probably end of July, end of June into July, we'll have them out. Should be a series of a couple of different pieces, one looking at sort of the portal process, one looking at money. What are the budgets? What are people spending? One talking about just some of the, excuse my language, but batshit crazy stuff that people have done. Some of the stories we've been told are ridiculous. So it'll be fun. I think it'll be good. I think it'll be illuminating for people and definitely, shameless plug, but please check it out when it does publish.
Well, you don't need to shameless plug us. Both Donald and I are subscribers to The Athletic.
My subscription just renewed like literally 2 days ago. So we're in
Donald.
it, baby. Another year.
Yeah, not even a question that it's a mandatory if you're someone who loves sports and especially loves college sports. Brendan Marks, thanks so much, man. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Appreciate you guys having me and letting me talk about hoops in the middle of the summer.
It's great stuff.
And Jason, what a great interview. We'd like to thank once again Brendan Marks of The Athletic from joining us for not one, but two parts of this series that we kind of had that with him. It started off again as like a 20-minute conversation and turned into almost 2 hours worth of conversation for us. And we could have gone a lot longer. We had to stop essentially because we all had things to do. We do live lives in the interim, in the off season, not during the regular season. But Jason, I want to start with this because of course, Brendan Marks for The Athletic, he writes for, he's on the beat for both UNC and Duke. He is a UNC grad. So when we view some of the things that he says about Duke, he can say it objectively, right? Objectively. And with UNC, he has to kind of, just like us, sometimes we have to take the rose-colored glasses off. And I was very shocked to hear kind of what he said about UNC and about how they've, sort of messed up some of the roster construction and some of the holes that they have, because some of the things that UNC is known for, right? Their rebounding especially could be big question marks entering the season.
Yeah, for sure. But to me, the fascinating part of that is that he explained why Carolina has had trouble luring a big man in the transfer portal. And I was stunned when he pointed this out. It's so obvious that I feel foolish for not knowing it myself. But he basically said, look, RJ Davis made it hard for UNC to get a top tier big man. That when UNC was out there bidding, because that's what it is now in the transfer portal. You're bidding on these guys. Yes, fit matters. Yes, opportunity matters, but you're also putting in a number. And when UNC was putting in their number for a lot of these big men, they couldn't match what some of these other schools, especially schools in the SEC and the Big 12. They could not match those schools because it would have thrown their, for lack of a better word, salary cap into utter disarray, because RJ Davis already had a number he was making. So let's say wild guess. I don't know. Let's say RJ Davis is making 1.5 million next year. Again, I don't know the exact number. Maybe
for sake
less,
of argument.
Yeah. For sake of argument. And I think that's probably a fairly decent, probably a pretty decent guess. Well, when the bidding gets to 1.7, 1.8, 2 million for some of these big men, Carolina can't go there. Because RJ Davis can't be sitting in a locker room with a guy who's clearly inferior to him and knowing that guy's making $200,000, $300,000, $500,000 more than RJ Davis is. And I wish that folks could have seen the look on my face when Brendan Marks said, and I mean, I'm going to repeat this phrase now, and I still can't believe that I'm about to say it. Brendan Marks said, salary cap management is the most important job of a college coach these days. I'm going to be quiet for a second and let you think on that, people. Salary cap management is the most important job for a college coach these days. My jaw was on the floor. And yes, intrinsically, I guess you could kind of guess that. It makes a lot of sense based on everything we've heard about roster construction through the portal and how important the portal is, not just in bringing players in, but in keeping your players in place. But to hear him say that, considering the research that he's been doing lately on how teams are putting their rosters together, on how coaches are operating in the portal era, salary cap management is the most important job. And then you realize UNC had a problem because RJ Davis capped their salary cap at a certain number, and it made it tough for them to bring in a big man. It's jaw-dropping, amazing that that's where we are in college basketball today.
And to be fair, it's not necessarily a salary cap by the purest definition, right? Like the NBA has a salary cap. You can't have your thing over that number, right?
There's no cap.
There's no cap. But the thing is what's interesting, and I'm glad he mentioned the RJ Davis example, because during the interview we talked about this. It reminded me of the Miami example where Nigel Pack got this big NIL deal to go to Miami, and Isaiah Wong's first response was, "Well, I'm the alpha dog here, so that means that I've earned a pay bump." And if you're going to bring in this guy and pay him more money, and I'm supposed to be the alpha dog, then I earn more money. That's how this works. And he kind of, quote, held out for more money and decided, okay, if you don't give me more money, I'm going to leave Miami. And so that was an interesting development. And I think, also, I think the one thing that was also fascinating was when he said that there's some schools that basically say, okay, if you were the starter, if you're the best player on the team, you get the best money. If you're the eighth best player on the team, you get the eighth most money. And they don't, that's your role. You don't move up and down. There's no promotion.
Yeah, your position is fixed. It's crazy, but that's how it works.
That's that. And again, I think that's part of some of these conversations that these players are having with teams, and they have to do it in such a short time. So I kind of gain a little bit more respect. It's not like I disrespected the portal, but I have more respect for these guys and what they have to go through, because this is not a drawn out 2-year process like when you're in high school, or a 3-year process when you're in high school. This is a 2 to 3 week process maximum. Like, if you think about, some of these guys are entering the portal and they're like, please do not contact me. I already know where I'm going. Like, don't talk to me. I don't want to hear all these different numbers, because that throws them out of whack. And then some of the guys who are getting these numbers, they're taking 5 or 6 visits, sometimes not even taking a visit to the school they end up choosing, because it's sometimes all about the top dollar. So it was very interesting how he put it, and it gives more perspective to where some of these moves are, right? I go exactly. This wasn't really a big example, but Jason, Miami, we talked about some of the guys they lost. They lost 2 starters on their team. And
their 2 best players last year. Wooga Poplar and No Chad Omier were their 2 best players last year. Yeah.
And they're gone. And Miami, they had the NIL, the Life Wallet guy, who was feeding a lot of their NIL money. That has started.
John Ruiz, yeah.
Yes. And that has started to dry up quite a bit, because he got into some financial trouble. When you're talking about money, financial trouble does not help NIL, because both of those include the word money. But the biggest thing, Jason, that between this conversation that we had with Brendan Marks and today that has happened, is that Miami just lost the president of the university. It was announced last week that Julio Frank is leaving Miami to become the chancellor at UCLA. Very sudden move, in many ways unexpected. They kind of were assuming that he might be up for jobs, but they did not think it was going to happen this quick. And it sounds like he kind of made it without telling a lot of people. But Jason, what happens when a president leaves? They have to find a new one. They have to spend more money on that process. They bring in the consultants and all of that, and they have the national hiring process. You know where that takes resources away from? The school, the athletic department, name, image, and likeness money. This could hamstring the athletic department until the school finds a replacement, because a lot of these things that have to be signed off, it's not like the athletic department runs independent of the rest of the university. The president is involved in some of these decisions and some of these budgets and in some of these these conversations. And if they don't have a president, that could hamstring the entire athletic department, because remember, down there, basketball is not even king, it's football. Then maybe baseball after that, before you get to basketball. So there's a lot of questions right now about how NIL is going to affect not just the basketball team, but the rest of that athletic department. But that's kind of the going rate now in college basketball and just college sports in general.
Yeah, I mean, you cannot stress too highly how significant money has become in college athletics, and it really makes you understand why some ACC teams are tremendously agitated. Probably the entire conference is super agitated over the way the Big Ten and the SEC have pulled away in terms of their financial intake from their TV contracts and such. Because and we don't need to get into all of this. It'll become a whole other conversation. Take us 20 more minutes. But I just do want to very quickly The reason it is so significant that the SEC and the Big Ten are way ahead of the ACC in terms of their revenue dollars is those schools are able to have unbelievable facilities, coaching salaries, all the things that a school is allowed to pay for. They're able to do those things without having to tap donors too much. Usually, if you want a new stadium, usually if you want a new locker room, if you're going to bring in a fancy dancy coach, it's got to be some moneyed donors who take care of those things. Well, an SEC school that's pulling in 10, 15 million more dollars per year than an ACC school, maybe they don't need to tap their donors quite as much for those kind of things. And as a result, that means the donors have more money available to pay NIL to the athletes. Because remember, the school can't pay NIL directly. It all comes from, these collectives, or whatever else you want to call them. Really, it's, collection of a couple very, very well-off, well-to-do financial backers of the sporting teams. And again, if there's just less financial pressure on your athletic department, then your donors are free to bid more for athletes. And we've seen there's a reason the SEC has risen as rapidly as it has in college basketball. There's a reason the Big 12, where schools are not, by the way, not spending on football as much as they used to. Programs like Kansas and Kansas State, Iowa State, they're not spending as much on college football. They're spending on college basketball. And there's a reason those programs, Baylor's another one, have just risen up. Houston, risen up so rapidly. Big 12 schools spending like crazy on basketball now. And it's really tough for a school like Duke to keep up.
And, to his credit, Brendan Marks said that in the ACC, Duke and UNC are the ones that are best set up for success in NIL. But as you mentioned, they're losing nationally in that area. And Jason, you bring up a good point that we were discussing before the show. In the 2000s, there was the facilities arm race, right? Everyone was building the biggest locker rooms, the best locker rooms, had the flat screen TVs, had the, masseuse, had the massage parlor and in the barbershop in the same room, right? Like they had all these gimmicks that when you walked to recruit into the locker room, they just go, wow. And they wanted to go there. Now they still have those locker rooms. They still have those flat screen TVs and the massage parlors and all the, things on demand, chefs on demand and stuff. But now when they walk in, the wow is not coming from the facilities. It's coming from the number that they place on the table during the NIL collective meeting. And that is where this new arms race is going. You mentioned some of the revenue that's brought in from some of these schools. Remember back in the day, Texas, Michigan, Ohio State were bringing in $100 million a year. That won't cut it anymore. They can't make just $100 million a year anymore because they'll hand that out in NIL dollars if they wanted to, across all the schools that they have, or all the sports that they have, and all the athletes that they have now. Now, Jason, we have sponsorships. That's going to be the new arms race. We talked a couple weeks ago about how FedEx was sponsoring NIL money at Memphis so that Memphis didn't have to worry about that. They could focus on some of the bigger players, and they still have this pool to come through. That was $25 million a year. And that ain't cutting it either. Right? Like that's not going to be enough to cover basketball in a year or two, just given how some of this is working out. So it really is a delicate thing. I really commend Duke for getting kind of this under control and having at least a plan and having to adapt every 5 seconds to, the change in the wind and change in, regulations and legislation. But this is, unfortunately, I also kind of have to, give them some oxygen here, because this is something that they're going to have to deal with on sometimes a daily, weekly basis until the NCAA kind of reins it in and brings it under control. Because as those dollars go up, people, like you said, there's going to be a point where people go, okay, well, this one says 2 million. Why can't you guys make it 3? You're Duke. Why can't you make it 3? You're UNC. Why can't you make it 4? Like the arms race is going to continue to go up because some people say people aren't worth this amount of money. They are if somebody pays it. And the problem is eventually somebody's going to say 5 million. That's nothing for this generational talent, right? Like a Cooper Flag comes in, give them 5 million for the year, because that's going to be worth it when they're bringing all the money in that they will just regenerate and pay out to somebody else.
Two other really quick things. Then we got to go. I know. The first one is you're talking about, the athletics arms race and what the recruits see when they walk in the locker room. Did you see the photo on Instagram of the recruits arriving at Texas just a few days ago?
Mhm.
Texas football had this event where were bringing in a bunch of recruits, and on the way into the locker room, the way into their practice stadium, it was lined with Ferraris. I mean, like, it was the most outrageous display of opulence that you will ever see. But the message was very, very clear. Come here. You can drive in one of these.
I will say, Jason, there was a picture just like a couple hours ago, one of the like Duke recruits for football that came in over the weekend. He was posing on Brooks Field at Wallace Wade Stadium with 2 Rolls Royces behind him. So, hey, y'all got Ferraris, we got Rolls Royces. Ferraris, you can drive. That's cool. You want to drive a Ferrari? Go to Texas. You want to be driven? Come to Duke. I guess that's the message.
The last thing I will mention about all this NIL stuff is I have heard through the grapevine that for the truly elite recruits, the kind of guys that Duke is mostly going after, who are sure thing, no matter what, absolute one and done kind of players, that NIL, believe it or not, is a little bit less of a consideration, because these are guys who know for certain that they will be in college for 1 year and then they'll be moving on to the NBA, where they'll be making $3, $5, $7, $10+ million a year on their rookie deal. And for guys like that saying, oh, I'm going to pay you an extra $200,000, it's not that important to them. What's important to them is a program that they know will allow them to develop, allow them to build a profile, allow them to build a marketing image that they can profit off of, and will prepare them for the NBA and for success in the NBA. And I think one of the reasons you still see Duke, one of the reasons Duke is a way bigger player in the high school recruiting game than they are in the portal recruiting game. The portal is about guys who aren't necessarily big NBA prospects. And Duke is not bidding on those kind of guys, because the guys who are big time NBA prospects, those are the guys that Duke is after. And those are the guys where, luckily, NIL dollars are not the only thing that makes the decision for them.
Well, it's also that they have more opportunities for sponsorships, right? Like, I mean, there's even some guys now that are going to be entering college that already have their own shoe deals, right? They already have their own apparel, deals.
Yeah.
They're already in commercials. Paula Banchero was, they had the JD Sports commercials in the Final Four, and JD Sports hadn't even landed in the United States yet, but he was in it. So you have those opportunities more for those type of guys. And of course, Duke, on the social media side, there's no one better. There's very few sports teams on this planet that are better than what Duke has. And as far as building a brand online and having that coupled on top of that, the amount of money that you can earn via your brand on social media is, sometimes exponential compared to just, the NIL, package that they lay on the table. So it's all super interesting. The arms race is going to continue. And I think and that's not to say what happens with the lawsuits with Florida State and Clemson, like that can change a lot of things as well. But that's just something way down the road that we just got to worry about later.
Hey, last thing really quick. Remember we were talking about Brendan Marks?
Yeah.
Right. This all started with us talking about the conversation we have with Brendan Marks. I do want to point out, I think it's really fascinating that he says, like, Louisville and Georgia Tech are 2 of the schools he's really watching for next year, that he thinks are really building something pretty good. He thinks both of them, he specifically said Louisville, could be a tournament team. It shows you the unbelievable power of the transfer portal, that Louisville could do that. They were literally one of the worst teams in ACC history. Not just bad, but like one of the worst teams in ACC history the past couple years. And every single guy on the roster leaves. They bring in a whole new roster, and he thinks they have a shot to be a tournament team this year. I'm glad to see Louisville back where it belongs. Louisville's arguably one of the top, 10, 15 programs in the sport. And it's good for the ACC for Louisville to apparently be on the right track again. And I just wanted to mention before we go that Brendan talked about more than just dollars and cents. He told us that there are some ACC teams on the rise and to be on the lookout for them.
Yeah, NC State being one of them. He's very high in NC State. You mentioned Georgia Tech. We were talking, Damon Stoudemire is building something pretty special down there, it feels like. And, despite the fact, and we were the brunt end of some of that special last year. Unfortunately, hopefully that won't happen this year. But it is something to look out for. And again, Georgia Tech is one of those programs. Yeah, it's not one of the top 10, 15 in the country, but it is one of those, in my mind, one of those ACC brands that always feels like when it's good, that means the ACC is great. So, looking forward to seeing them do well, especially against UNC, but not against us. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But Jason, that'll do it for episode number 632 of the Duke Basketball Roundup. Thank you so much for everyone. Thank you to Brendan Marks again at The Athletic for joining us for these 2 episodes. We really, really appreciate his insight. And again, follow his work at The Athletic. It's very, very much well worth it. You can get a subscription for $1 a month right now. So go subscribe to that. It's very, very crucial as we get into the offseason and also as we progress towards the season this fall. For Jason, I am Donald. This is the Duke Basketball Roundup. And now it's time for the Duke Band to play us out and take us home.